The blueprint lay spread across my drafting table, a sprawling constellation of lines and curves. Months of meticulous work had culminated in this, the verdant spire. It wasn't just a building. It was an ecosystem, a testament to humanity's potential to coexist with nature, not conquer it. Glass and steel would rise towards the heavens, but within, a living world would flourish. The spire was my masterpiece, a culmination of years of study, of sleepless nights spent wrestling with complex equations, of pushing the boundaries of architectural possibility. But it was more than just a structure. It was a testament to our love. Clara, my wife, the brilliant botanist, was the soul of this project. Her expertise in plant life was the missing piece of the puzzle, the lifeblood that would nourish the spire's intricate vertical gardens. I envisioned a symphony of life within its walls. Cascading waterfalls, vibrant blooms carpeting every surface, the air thick with the scent of exotic flora. The spire would be a haven, a sanctuary for both man and nature, a beacon of hope in a world often consumed by discord. Clara, with her infectious enthusiasm, had embraced the project with the fervor of a true believer. We spent countless hours poring over the plans, our minds intertwined, our spirits buoyed by the shared vision. We were a team, a partnership as harmonious as the delicate balance of nature itself. But beneath the surface of our shared passion, a subtle shift had begun to occur, a tremor, barely perceptible, in the foundations of our once unshakable bond. The spire began to rise from the earth, a skeletal framework of steel and glass reaching for the sky. Each beam, each panel, was placed with precision, a testament to the meticulous planning that had gone into its design. But it was Clara's work that truly brought the structure to life. She moved through the burgeoning building like a conductor leading an orchestra, her touch coaxing forth a symphony of green. Vines snaked along the steel supports, their tendrils reaching out to embrace the sunlight streaming through the glass facade. Delicate ferns unfurled their fronds in the humid air, while orchids, with their flamboyant blooms, added splashes of vibrant color to the verdant tapestry. Clara's knowledge of plant life was astounding. She understood the intricate relationships between species, the delicate balance of light and water, the subtle interplay of nutrients and soil. She had created a microcosm of the natural world, a self-regulating ecosystem that thrived within the confines of the spire. I watched her as she worked, her brow furrowed in concentration, her hands gently coaxing a stubborn vine into place. There was a quiet determination in her movements, a sense of purpose that I had always admired. But lately, I had noticed a change in her demeanor, a flicker of distraction in her eyes, a fleeting hesitation in her touch. At first, I dismissed it as fatigue, the inevitable consequence of long hours and demanding work. But as the days passed, the feeling persisted, a nagging unease that I couldn't shake off. There was a distance in her gaze, a subtle withdrawal that left me feeling like a stranger in my own home. The spire, once a symbol of our shared passion, now seemed to cast a long shadow over our relationship. Its intricate network of living walls, so carefully designed to foster harmony, now felt like a barrier between us, a verdant maze obscuring the truth. The city lights twinkled below, a vast expanse of concrete and steel stretching towards the horizon. I stood on the observation deck of the spire, the cool night air whipping at my face. The building was nearly complete, a towering monument to human ingenuity and nature's resilience. But something wasn't right. I had been working late, as usual, meticulously reviewing the building systems, ensuring every sensor, every pump, every vent was functioning flawlessly. It was during one of these late-night inspections that I stumbled upon the anomaly. A discrepancy in the ventilation system, a slight deviation in airflow that shouldn't have been there. Following the trail of inconsistencies, I found myself in a service corridor, a narrow passageway tucked away behind the lush foliage of the vertical gardens. A section of the wall, seamlessly integrated with the surrounding greenery, seemed subtly different. With a gentle push, a hidden door swung inward, revealing a small, uncharted room. My heart pounded in my chest. This room wasn't on the blueprints. It wasn't part of my design. Who had built it? And why? The room was bare, devoid of furniture or decoration. Only a single stark light bulb illuminated the space, casting long, eerie shadows on the smooth, concrete walls. A faint hum emanated from a ventilation panel, the source of the airflow discrepancy I had detected earlier. I felt a chill run down my spine. This hidden chamber, a secret space concealed within the heart of my creation, felt like a violation, a betrayal of the trust and transparency that had always defined our partnership. Who was I to trust now? The discovery of the hidden room gnawed at me, a persistent splinter in my mind. I found myself scrutinizing every detail, every interaction, searching for clues to its purpose and its creator. Clara, usually so open and forthcoming, had become withdrawn, her thoughts veiled behind a curtain of distraction. I began to notice subtle changes in her routine. Hushed phone calls taken in the dead of night, whispered conversations behind closed doors, a sudden preoccupation with her appearance. She would disappear for hours at a time, offering vague explanations about errands and meetings. One evening, I returned home from a late meeting to find her speaking on the phone, her voice low and urgent. As I entered the room, she abruptly ended the call, a flicker of panic crossing her face. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a colleague," she replied, a little too quickly. "We were discussing a project." Her words felt hollow, devoid of conviction. The seed of doubt, planted by the discovery of the hidden room, had taken root, its tendrils slowly choking the life out of our relationship. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that my suspicions were unfounded. But the evidence was mounting, a steady drip of inconsistencies and evasions that eroded the foundation of trust we had built over the years. The spire, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now felt like a stage for a carefully orchestrated deception. Its living walls, so vibrant and alive, seemed to mock me with their obliviousness to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. The nights were filled with restless tossing and turning, my mind racing with unanswered questions. The hidden room, the whispered conversations, Clara's evasive behavior, the pieces of the puzzle swirled around me, refusing to form a coherent picture. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I began to investigate. I spent hours poring over the building plans, searching for any clue that might explain the existence of the secret chamber. I reviewed security footage, scrutinizing every face that passed through the spire's corridors, hoping to identify the mysterious caller who had spoken to Clara in hushed tones. One afternoon, while reviewing access logs for the service corridor leading to the hidden room, I noticed a recurring pattern. A keycard, registered to a contractor who had worked on the spire's early construction phase, had been used to access the area on multiple occasions, always late at night, always during Clara's unexplained absences. The contractor's name was Julian. He was a skilled engineer, specializing in environmental control systems. I remembered him vaguely from the early days of the project, a quiet, unassuming man who had always kept to himself. But why would he be accessing the hidden room? And what was his connection to Clara? A sickening realization began to dawn on me. Julian's expertise in environmental systems, his access to the hidden room, Clara's sudden interest in that area of the spire. It all pointed to a collaboration, a secret project they were pursuing without my knowledge. The thought of Clara working with another man, sharing her knowledge, her passion, her time, filled me with a bitter resentment. The spire, once a testament to our shared vision, now felt like a monument to their clandestine partnership. The spire, once a source of pride and accomplishment, now loomed over me like a menacing specter. Its intricate network of walkways and gardens, its soaring glass facade, its carefully calibrated ecosystem, all of it felt tainted, corrupted by the secrets it concealed. I wandered through its corridors, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous spaces. The lush foliage, once a source of solace and inspiration, now seemed to press in on me, suffocating me with its verdant embrace. The air, thick with the scent of exotic blooms, felt heavy, oppressive. Everywhere I looked, I saw reflections of my own shattered trust. The cascading waterfalls, once a symbol of purity and renewal, now seemed to mock me with their ceaseless flow, a constant reminder of the passage of time, of opportunities lost and betrayals endured. The spire had become a labyrinth of doubt, a maze of hidden pathways and concealed intentions. I felt lost within its walls, trapped in a web of deceit spun by the woman I loved. Each day that passed brought fresh torment. Clara's absences grew more frequent, her explanations more evasive. The distance between us widened, a chasm carved by suspicion and resentment. I tried to confront her, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. The fear of confirmation, of having my worst fears realized, paralyzed me. I was trapped in a cycle of doubt and denial, unable to move forward, unable to escape the suffocating grip of the spire's labyrinthine embrace. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I couldn't simply stand by and watch as my life, my creation, my love, crumbled around me. I had to act. But how? Confrontation seemed futile, a mere band-aid on a gaping wound. No, I needed something more, something that would expose the truth, something that would force Clara to confront the consequences of her actions. And then it came to me, a plan as intricate and elegant as the spire itself. I wouldn't resort to violence or aggression. Instead, I would use my own creation, my architectural mastery, to weave a subtle trap, a metaphorical labyrinth of consequences. I began to make subtle adjustments to the spire's environmental controls. Nothing drastic, nothing that would harm the building or its inhabitants. Just minor alterations, imperceptible to the untrained eye, but enough to disrupt the delicate balance of the ecosystem. I reduced the flow of water to certain sections of the vertical gardens, causing some plants to wilt and wither. I adjusted the temperature settings, creating pockets of unseasonal warmth and coolness. I manipulated the lighting system, casting long shadows and creating an unsettling atmosphere of unease. The changes were gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but over time, they would become increasingly apparent, a subtle but persistent reminder that something was amiss. The spire, once a haven of harmony and balance, would become a reflection of the turmoil within our relationship, a living testament to Clara's betrayal. It was a cruel plan, perhaps, but I was driven by a desperate need for justice, for a reckoning that would expose the truth and restore the balance that had been so ruthlessly disrupted. The spire, my masterpiece, would become my instrument of revenge, a silent witness to the unraveling of our lives. The first signs of change were subtle, almost imperceptible. A few leaves turning brown at the edges, a slight drooping of once vibrant blossoms, a subtle shift in the air's humidity. Clara, preoccupied with her clandestine activities, seemed oblivious to the subtle distress signals emanating from her beloved garden. But as the days passed, the changes became more pronounced. Sections of the vertical gardens began to wither, their once lush foliage turning brown and brittle. The air, once filled with the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers, now carried a faint scent of decay. The spire's inhabitants, accustomed to the building's pristine environment, began to notice the change. Whispers of concern rippled through the corridors. Questions were raised, complaints were lodged. But Clara, blinded by her own deception, dismissed the concerns as overreactions, attributing the changes to seasonal variations or minor technical glitches. I watched her as she moved through the withering gardens, her brow furrowed in concern, her hands gently touching the dying plants. There was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a hint of unease that I hadn't seen before. Was she beginning to suspect that something was amiss? Or was it simply the realization that her carefully crafted ecosystem was slipping from her control? The spire, once a symbol of her mastery over nature, now stood as a testament to her own fallibility. The withering gardens, a reflection of her own decaying conscience, a constant reminder of the secrets she had kept, the trust she had betrayed. I felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of remorse for the pain I was inflicting. But the desire for justice, for a reckoning that would expose the truth, outweighed any compassion I might have felt. The spire, my creation, my masterpiece, was now an instrument of retribution, a silent witness to the unraveling of our lives. The spire's ecosystem continued its slow decline, a gradual unraveling of the delicate balance Clara had so carefully cultivated. The once vibrant gardens now bore the scars of neglect, their beauty marred by patches of withered foliage and dying blooms. The growing unrest among the building's inhabitants, coupled with the undeniable evidence of the deteriorating environment, forced Clara to confront the reality of the situation. She could no longer dismiss the concerns as mere overreactions or attribute the changes to natural causes. Something was clearly wrong, and she was determined to find the source of the problem. Her investigation led her back to the hidden room, the secret chamber she had so carefully concealed from me. It was there, amidst the humming machinery and blinking lights, that she discovered the truth. Julian, her collaborator, had been manipulating the spire's environmental controls, subtly altering the settings to create the conditions necessary for their secret project. He had exploited her trust, using her knowledge and expertise to further his own agenda. The project, she discovered, was a radical experiment in genetic engineering, an attempt to create a new species of plant capable of adapting to extreme environmental conditions. Julian believed that the spire, with its self-contained ecosystem, was the perfect testing ground for his research. Clara, horrified by the implications of his work, confronted him, demanding an explanation. He admitted his deception, arguing that the potential benefits of his research outweighed any risks. He painted a picture of a world ravaged by climate change, where his genetically modified plants would be the key to survival. But Clara was unconvinced. She saw the danger in his hubris, the potential for unintended consequences. She realized that she had been blinded by her own ambition, her desire to push the boundaries of botanical science, and had unwittingly become complicit in a dangerous scheme. The truth, once hidden within the spire's labyrinthine depths, was now laid bare, its consequences rippling through the building's ecosystem and the lives of its inhabitants. The unraveling had begun. I found Clara in the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the cityscape spread out below. The once vibrant hues of the setting sun were muted by the haze of pollution, casting a somber pall over the urban sprawl. She looked pale and drawn, the weight of her deception etched into the lines of her face. I approached her slowly, my footsteps silent on the polished floor. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge my presence. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, her mind grappling with the consequences of her actions. "I know," I said quietly. She stiffened, her shoulders tensing, but she still didn't turn to face me. "I know about the hidden room," I continued, my voice steady and measured. "I know about Julian and his experiment." She finally turned, her eyes wide with surprise and fear. "How?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is that you betrayed my trust, Clara. You betrayed our partnership, our love." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "The spire," I said, gesturing towards the vast expanse of glass and steel that surrounded us, "was supposed to be a symbol of our shared vision, a testament to our love. But you turned it into a lie, a monument to your deception." She finally met my gaze, her eyes filled with shame and remorse. "I'm so sorry, Elias," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice hardening. "You hurt me deeply, and now you have to face the consequences." My words hung heavy in the air, echoing through the vast expanse of the observation deck. Clara remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor, her body trembling with suppressed emotion. The time for explanations, for apologies, had passed. Now was the time for consequences. I turned away from her and walked towards the control panel that governed the spire's environmental systems. With a few deft keystrokes, I initiated the final phase of my plan. The subtle manipulations I had been making over the past weeks were now amplified, the delicate balance of the ecosystem pushed beyond its tipping point. The changes were swift and dramatic. The temperature within the spire began to fluctuate wildly, plunging from sweltering heat to chilling cold. The lighting system flickered erratically, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. The carefully calibrated irrigation system malfunctioned, flooding some areas while leaving others parched. The spire's inhabitants, already on edge due to the gradual deterioration of the environment, were thrown into a state of panic. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and a cacophony of voices filled the air. The once harmonious ecosystem was collapsing, its carefully orchestrated balance shattered. Clara watched in horror as her creation, her pride and joy, descended into chaos. The withering gardens, the erratic climate, the panicked inhabitants, it was all a reflection of her own internal turmoil, a physical manifestation of the guilt and shame that consumed her. The spire, once a symbol of hope and harmony, was now a monument to her betrayal, a stark reminder of the consequences of her actions. It was a symbolic collapse, a controlled demolition of the world she had built, both literally and figuratively. The chaos within the spire intensified. The once lush vertical gardens were now a patchwork of withered brown and sickly yellow. Water cascaded down walls in uncontrolled torrents, while other areas suffered from an arid drought. The air, thick with the stench of decay and the sharp tang of ozone from electrical malfunctions, was almost unbearable. Clara stumbled through the disintegrating environment, her senses overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of the collapsing ecosystem. She had always prided herself on her ability to nurture and control the natural world. But now, her own creation was turning against her, mirroring the chaos she had unleashed in her personal life. The panicked cries of the spire's inhabitants echoed through the corridors, a constant reminder of the consequences of her deception. She had betrayed not only me but also the trust of the people who had placed their faith in her vision, in her ability to create a safe and sustainable haven. As she wandered through the disintegrating environment, she came face to face with the physical manifestations of her betrayal. A once prized orchid, now withered and drooping, its petals scattered on the floor like fallen tears. A vibrant mural of tropical foliage, now faded and peeling, its colors muted by neglect. A cascading waterfall, once a source of tranquility, now a raging torrent, its waters eroding the foundations of the spire itself. Each encounter was a fresh blow, a stark reminder of the beauty she had destroyed, the trust she had shattered. The spire, once a source of pride and accomplishment, was now a mirror reflecting her own failings, her own betrayal. It was a harsh and unforgiving reflection, but one she desperately needed to see. As the spire's systems continued their orchestrated descent into chaos, Clara found herself increasingly isolated. The other residents, caught up in their own struggles for survival amidst the failing environment, had little time or sympathy for her plight. They saw her as the architect of their misfortune, the one responsible for the collapse of their utopian haven. Even Julian, her co-conspirator, had abandoned her. Faced with the escalating consequences of their actions, he had retreated, leaving her to face the fallout alone. His promises of support and collaboration had proven hollow, his loyalty as fleeting as the artificial stability he had helped create. Clara wandered the corridors of the spire, a ghost haunting the ruins of her own creation. The once familiar spaces now felt alien and hostile, the lush gardens transformed into a suffocating jungle of decay. The faces she passed were filled with fear, anger, and resentment, their gazes accusing, their whispers condemning. The weight of her isolation pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. She had built walls around herself, walls of secrecy and deception, and now those walls had become her prison. She longed for connection, for understanding, but found only judgment and condemnation. The spire, once a symbol of community and shared purpose, had become a place of isolation and despair. Clara, trapped within its crumbling walls, was left to confront the consequences of her actions alone, a solitary figure adrift in a sea of her own making. The spire had reached a state of controlled pandemonium. While not a danger to anyone's physical safety, the carefully orchestrated decay of the environment had created a psychological pressure cooker. The point had been made. Clara understood the extent of the damage her betrayal had caused. It was time for me to leave. I packed a small bag, taking only the essentials. As I moved through the chaotic corridors, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The spire, once the center of my world, now felt like a burden, a monument to a love that had withered and died. I passed Clara once, in a deserted hallway. She looked haggard and defeated, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. I paused, wanting to say something, to offer some words of comfort or forgiveness. But the words wouldn't come. The chasm between us was too wide, the damage too deep. I simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of our shared pain, and continued on my way. Leaving the spire was like shedding a skin, a painful but necessary process of renewal. I walked away from the chaos, the recriminations, the shattered dreams, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights twinkled below, a vast and indifferent expanse stretching towards the horizon. I didn't look back. The spire, with all its complexities and contradictions, was no longer my concern. It was Clara's burden to bear, a constant reminder of the choices she had made, the trust she had broken. My departure was not an act of forgiveness, nor was it an act of revenge. It was simply an acceptance of the truth, a recognition that some wounds are too deep to heal. The spire stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, a skeletal monument of glass and steel. Within its walls, the carefully orchestrated chaos began to subside. The environmental controls, having served their purpose, returned to a state of stasis, albeit a fragile one. The panicked cries of the residents faded into a weary silence. Clara moved through the empty corridors, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air, still thick with the lingering scent of decay, carried a heavy silence, a silence that spoke volumes. The spire, once a vibrant hub of life and activity, now felt like a tomb, a hollow shell of its former self. She entered the observation deck, the place where she and I had once shared dreams and aspirations. The panoramic view of the city, now bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun, offered a stark contrast to the desolation within the spire. She looked out at the sprawling metropolis, a vast and indifferent landscape that stretched towards the horizon. The city, with its ceaseless activity and relentless energy, seemed oblivious to the turmoil within the spire's walls. The spire, once a symbol of their shared vision, now stood as a monument to their broken trust. It was an empty shell, a hollow echo of what it once was. The gardens, though damaged, would recover. The systems, though stressed, would stabilize. But the trust, once shattered, could not be so easily repaired. The emptiness of the spire mirrored the emptiness within her. She was alone, isolated, left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the love she had lost, the trust she had betrayed. The spire, a labyrinth of consequences, held her captive, not with physical walls, but with the weight of her own choices. It was a prison of her own making, a place where the truth echoed in the silence, a constant reminder of the price of betrayal.